Um, there is a world you can find every morning in newspaper columns and every night on TV news bulletins. It's a world of precarious stability where your job and your home and your security are threatened by radicals with funny hair and funny clothes and foreign food. It's a frightened and a frightening world. And for 5 years or more now, racism has been added to the list of threats from these dreaded radicals. The left, it said, are a bunch of anti-Semites. We've had endless news bulletins where wise and respectable figures shake their heads in horror and say this racist Corbynite cancer must be purged, while some on the left have insisted in response that there isn't much racism at all. It is time, I think, to end this absurdity. Britain is the land that housed its black and brown workers in the top floors of a London tower block, so that when that block burned down, the faces of the dead were dark. That building, that bonfire, was named after Francis Grenfell, a colonial commander who massacred people in Ireland and Africa, and now the descendants of his victims will be remembered forever under his surname. That is Britain, the land whose government threatens to send in the full might of the Navy against desperate people in the Channel, boarding makeshift dinghies in search of safety. That is Britain, whose Muslim communities are surveilled to test their compliance with British values. And if you think, oh, well, yes, but anti-Semitism is different, our political masters are enlightened and tolerant of Jews, then you should know that our Prime Minister wrote a novel replete with anti-Semitic caricatures of hook-nosed, greedy businessmen. You should know that Prince Charles, the heir to the throne, Britain's richest welfare scrounger, once complained that America is ruled by a Jewish lobby. You should know that Alistair Campbell once designed a national election campaign depicting his Jewish opponents as Shylock and Fagin and flying pigs. To think that racism is alien to these shores is to know nothing of Britain. And to say that, as we've heard recently, that the Labour Party has always been an anti-racist party is to insult every asylum-seeking child pushed into destitution by the calculated decisions of the Blair government to appease the right-wing press and prove they could be tough on the poor and the foreign. My first political activity as a child was volunteering at a drop-in centre run by my synagogue for refugees made homeless by a British Labour government. Corbyn supporters on the left are not immune from bigotry either. I have spent a few years now as a British Jew saying that. The years since the financial crash have seen a rise in anti-Semitism. That is the awful and the dangerous truth of a world of insecurity where people reach for easy and paranoid answers on both the right and the left. So the battle should not be over whether there is racism, but how to fight it. And I stand in a tradition that thinks the answer is a politics that prizes human dignity for all, without exceptions, against all the violence of empire and capital, understanding that miserable hatreds and prejudices are born of a broken world, and it is a world we must utterly transform. Now, we're brought here tonight to stand with Jeremy Corbyn. That's the title of our rally. So why? Well, I hear he's a nice man, but that doesn't much interest me. What interests me is where he comes from and what politicized him. He learned his radicalism in Jamaica as a young man. He was caught up in a wave of optimism as Michael Manley's opposition on the island championed workers at home and alliances with third world radicalism abroad. Michael Manley wanted a minimum wage, free education, land reform, a war on illiteracy, and an expanded democratic franchise. He wanted to do all these things in office, and he insisted that doing them required removing Jamaica from the suffocating orbit of the American state. Energized by Manley and Jamaica, a young Corbyn then traveled across South America. In Chile, he stood with thousands of others at a huge May Day demonstration, Come Allende rally, the great democratic leader overthrown in a US-backed coup. And in his final speech of the 2019 election, Corbyn summoned the memory of a Chilean musician, surely unknown to most of his young British audience, Victor Jara. Corbyn told the crowd how he sung of revolution until Pinochet's men rounded him up and smashed his hands and his guitar before they killed him. And Corbyn quoted Victor Jara, "My guitar is not for the rich. No, nothing like that. My song is of the ladder we are building to reach the stars." That was the world that produced Jeremy Corbyn. So many column inches have bemoaned the weirdness of it, or mocked the madness of facing British voters with these arcane commitments to faraway places. But that gets it all wrong. Corbyn's internationalism was born of a recognition of shared interests. The goal was freedom from domination, to empower people everywhere to live standing up and not to be humiliated on their knees. The loony left that was loathed in the tabloid press of 1980s Britain was hated as much for championing gay liberation and black power and women's liberation as working class emancipation and working class power and socialism. And so this is why we care about Palestine. We care just as people all over the world were once inspired by the courage and the fortitude of the people of Vietnam, who, with limited means, confronted might and power and demanded freedom and independence. It is what the people of South Africa did too through long years of prison and violence. And today, against a network of checkpoints and blockades, in the last active site of settler colonial violence in the world, the people of Palestine continue to prize freedom. And so they speak to a current that runs through our blood too, the demand that human beings should be able to live in dignity. These are the dreams that briefly occupied the mainstream of British life while Jeremy Corbyn led the Labour Party. But these dreams have always been there, far from the attention of journalists and commentators. They are the dreams of Saklat Vala and CLR James, of Stuart Hall and Shivanandan, and every unknown and unnamed militant who shouted, "Black and white, unite and fight," and faced down the miseries of division and hatred in the quest for a better world. We need to reinvent those traditions now for a thoroughly different world, but we need them still and urgently. The ice caps are melting and the seas are rising and the forests are burning and the walls are growing higher. And it has never been more true that either we all win or some of us will burn and others will drown. So wear the badge of anti-imperialism and anti-capitalism and call them the badges of dignity and freedom and survival against a capitalist society that would burn down the world. Fight racism, fight anti-Semitism, including on the left. And please remember the words of the Hebrew Bible: justice, justice shall we pursue. Thanks so much.